All right, you guys, we're going to get started. Is my vocal sound, everything okay up there? Okay, great. Shayne Jaquith is the Watershed Restoration Program Manager for the Vermont chapter of the Nature Conservancy. He works on the protection and restoration of Vermont's riverscapes for flood resilience, biodiversity, and water quality. Before working at TNC, Shayne spent 16 years as a river scientist for the Vermont DEC Rivers Program, where he helped assess the physical condition of rivers, developed restoration projects, and provided technical assistance to transportation infrastructure managers, farmers, and foresters. Over the course of his career, Shayne is increasingly focused on the importance of large wood as a driver of critical natural processes that create and maintain healthy riverscapes.
Thanks. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you all for coming. My colleague Gus Goodwin, who a lot of you may know, who's more the forest ecologist type than am I, he's not here at the conference, but he kind of pushed me into doing this. He loves to draw the linkage between what he understands about rivers and what he knows about forest ecosystems. So he pushed me into doing this. I submitted the abstract, and then it got accepted. And then I was like, then some time went by, and the programming came out, and I looked at all the great talks, and I was like, all these old growth people and all these great talks, like who's going to show up for my talk about rivers? So yeah, thank you very much. So thank you all for showing up. It's great. So as the name of the talk implies, I'm going to talk a bit about, what the science, what my professional experience how the science and my professional experience kind of inform my understanding of the importance of the role in wood in our streams and rivers throughout the state. So with that, I'm going to advance the slide. And there's that and that. Okay, so I usually give this talk, or a version of this talk, to folks who aren't so interested and knowledgeable in forest ecology. So I take it way back, to sort of we go into paleo sort of science here. This slide is from Janine Castro, who's a long-term geologist, hydrologist, river restorationist for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I think she's in Oregon. She's very experienced, great practitioner. I'm stealing a slide from her that she uses to talk about the fact that rivers and trees and critters that live in rivers co-evolved, and they're completely interdependent. And basically the story goes, if we're looking at the bottom panel, I think it's about 365 million years ago, the early Devonian, or actually we're going back to the Middle Silurian, right? Our rivers weren't vegetated. They were very dynamic. They were full of gravel bars. They were what we called braided river systems. There wasn't enough stability for life to really take hold. And the fossil record shows that, right? Very little life in our river systems at that time. We advanced to about 365 million years ago to the early Devonian. Herbaceous rooted plants start to emerge. Those streams start to channelize, as you can see as the figure on the right. Those bars start to vegetate, and the biodiversity in our streams starts to increase. By the late Devonian, we have rooted trees, and our rivers are really stabilizing, and there's an explosion of in-stream aquatic life that takes place. So again, trees, rivers, and the organisms that inhabit those rivers co-evolved, and they're completely interdependent. Looking more recently in time, there's a paper out of the Pacific Northwest. It's actually that's like a meta paper looking at a number of different studies. And one of the images in that paper that I really loved was this one that conveys how rivers, or forests shape rivers, trees shape rivers, and rivers in turn shape the forest. So in the first panel, we see an image of a river that developed in a recovering forest. It's post-agricultural. And that river is a single thread channel, as we typically find in those agricultural settings. And it's the movement of the river, the meandering back and forth side to side, that really controls the age of the trees. If you look at as you get closer to the river, in the wake of the river are young trees to the right of the channel. And as it's moving to the left, it's removing the older trees. And again, in its wake, the newer trees are springing up. And really, the age of the trees are controlled by the rate at which that river migrates back and forth across the valley, right? Because it's continually removing some and then letting others come in. In the bottom section, this is a river that exists in a more mature, maybe this is an old growth forest, I don't know, more mature forest though. Large trees, a lot of those trees have come down, they're dying, they're becoming that large woody debris that we talk about. They're falling into the stream, they anchor the cobbles and the gravels, and islands start to build on top of this large wood, right? And then the large trees grow on those islands and they become very stable. These types of channels that we find in these forests can't migrate laterally back and forth because the trees are just too robust, right? But they will, during times of flood, jump out of their bank, carve a new channel, maybe occupy a previously channel that has long been unoccupied. So they are anastomosed. And you can see the difference in the meander geometry, the meander pattern on the right. So the river shaping the trees and the trees shaping the river. So advancing quite a bit, and well, still looking back at some time, right? Rivers of old. So, and it's been great. A number of the presentations have really clearly articulated the amount of large woody debris that we had on forest floors. And of course, not only on the forest floor, but in the streams as well, right? So our rivers were really controlled by the trees, both live and standing and dead on the forest floor. So that, water would accumulate energy, but it would be hindered by a live and recent deadfall here. And then over there, a long decaying log would finally give way and you'd get a new channel path over there, right? So again, the river and the trees working together, and the trees really controlling the shape of the river. Advancing to European settlement, right? And we've looked at European settlement over the last couple of days in different contexts. European settlement was hard on forests and it was hard on rivers, right? We had log drives. Well, actually, let me back up. First, beaver were nearly extirpated from the landscape, and the estimates of beaver prevalence on the North American continent states that there were approximately 67 beavers per square mile of land, and that you likely would come across a beaver dam every 25 to 100 yards if you were walking a stream on this continent. So that loss of the beavers and then the decay and the collapse of all those beaver dams completely transformed the hydrologic network of North America. So the beavers are nearly extirpated. Then the log drives come. Some of you may know Robert Pike's works in his book, Tall Trees and Tough Men. He talks about men working from early April through late November, from dawn to dusk, waist deep in water and muck, hitching the horses to the snags that had accumulated 100 years of mud to make way for the log drives that would then come. So tremendous change to the channels, all of the work that went in and snagging and clearing the channels for the log drives. And then, of course, the log drives themselves, the splash dams on the right side. The splash dams were built to create ponds. All the wood that would be skidded or hauled out of the woods would be put in the ponds, and when the time was right, the gates were thrown open, and a torrent of water and wood would charge down the streams. And you can just imagine the tremendous impact that all had on our river network. So a lot of impact from European settlement. There was a fellow who did a talk at the 2023 Maine Sustainability and Water Conference. He used this slide to demonstrate all of that in one clear image. You see that entire timeline, geologic time, and the glacial retreat, the tundra vegetation, Native Americans and their impacts on the landscape, going back to 14,000 years. And then in the last 250 years, we have the log drives in Maine. And each item that's crossed out in red was eliminated by what happened in that small 250-year time frame. So tremendous change that European settlement had on our river networks. And then even more recently, we maybe moved out of the forest. The logging's, changed quite dramatically. We moved out of the forest. Our impacts changed. The forest, started to recover. But down in the valleys where our villages are and our developments are, we continued wholeheartedly managing our riverscapes. We dredged them to keep the water in the channels. We bermed them to make sure the water would stay in the channels. We straightened them to get them out of our way. And then we hard armored the banks to keep them where we wanted them. So if we want to understand the impacts of all of these stressors to our river systems, this image, this concept of balance, and specifically this is referred to as Lane's balance because it was presented by a hydraulic engineer, I think in 48, as a way to explain the relationship between the power of the water on one side of the balance and the resistance of the material that water has to move, right? And what we see is when you increase the power of the water, and all those things I talked about really, and everything we still do today, increases the power of our rivers for the most part. When you increase the power of the water, of course you get erosion, you get channel enlargement. Here it's titled incision. Thank you. So everything we do really pushes our rivers towards enlarging. And when you do that for decades, if not centuries, continually acting on the landscape and in the rivers in ways that just increases the power of those channels will go into what's known as an evolution process. This is a channel evolution model. There's different variations of these, but basically it shows that, and in this case, it's the homeowners deciding they want to berm the banks so that they no longer get wet. When you do things for long periods of time to increase the power of the river's going to down cut. That's that second image down, stage 2, that incision stage. And then the banks are going to get so high that it's going to go through this widening phase. And then all that material comes in and big bars grow in these channels and push the channel around. And those bars eventually vegetate and you get to stage 5, which is a stable stage, but you lost a tremendous amount of land mass, nutrients, any human investments along the bank. Right, so that's a channel evolution model. The Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation's Rivers program has assessed about 5,000 miles of river throughout the state and found that we are nearly 75 or approximately 75% of our river miles, or those that they assessed, are in stages 2 through 3. They're bigger, they're deeper, they're disconnected from their floodplain. They're very high energy systems. So with this in mind, and other things in mind, a lot of river restorationists have turned to this idea, and going back to the fact that trees are so interconnected with rivers, a lot of practitioners have turned to this idea of replenishing wood structure to our river systems to improve those river systems. So again, another image of the Lane's balance. And Michael Pollack, who's a practitioner and researcher for NOAA out west, who's a leader in a lot of river restoration work, if you look closely at that second image, you see what he included into that image, and that's biology. The importance that biology plays in our river systems. And when you add biology, you actually change the balance and you reduce the power, you increase the burden, and you start to build up the river system channel and you start to build the landscape. So I'm going to really quickly, because I'm taking a little bit longer than I probably have, I'm going to really quickly fly, and I think Judd's going to reinforce some of this, some of the specific benefits of wood structure to rivers. One, they hold the leaf pack. Without structure, leaf pack flushes downstream every fall or throughout the winter. Leaf pack in our canopied, cold water, no sunlight streams are the base of the food web, right? Is the base of the food web. Leaf pack and other coarse particulate organic matter. Wood structure pushes the water into the river beneath, or the hyporeic zone. That exchange of water between the surface water and the hyporeic zone underneath pushes that water through. Well, in that exchange, it's processed by lots of microorganisms, such as biofilms. That cleanses the water. There's a lot of processing goes on there. It's also held longer in that river beneath in the hyporeic zone. And it's colder, so it can replenish our streams during times of warm times of low flow when we need that replenishment of water. It creates physical habitat. The top left is an image without any structure. It's very homogeneous. It's devoid of physical habitat. No pools, no riffles, no runs. You add wood and you get the riffles. the shallow, fast water. You get the glides, the slow, shallow water. You get the pools, the deep, slow water. So that structure gives the water something to scour against and create the physical habitat. Picture on the right is just an image from a project that we did, the Nature Conservancy did down in Windham, Vermont. Wood pushes water, wood jams, clogs the channel, pushes water onto the floodplain, reducing flows downstream. If we were to look close, if we had time to look close at these hydrographs, they basically are just showing that after the wood jams go in, the water is stored in these restored reaches, and the downstream flow peaks are reduced, increasing flood resilience downstream. This is my favorite, and I'll probably have to leave it with this slide, but this is my favorite. Okay, I messed up the animation on this, so it's a little bit different. Okay, so what you're looking at here, ignore the yellow lines. That channel that my colleague Murray is walking in, you can see how deep that channel is. That's about 3 feet, 3-foot tall bank heights. The drainage area to that stream is about 1 square mile. The bank heights on that stream should be about a foot high. You should be able to walk across that stream without even noticing that you crossed it. It's big boulders and cobbles. It's high energy. It pushes all that material. That jam that you see is the accumulation of 3 or 4 or 5 jams that we constructed in 2020. In 2020-23, the flood came through and relocated, combined all those jams, shoved them into place where they were, filled all the interstitial spaces with gravels and sands, and created this almost monolithic structure. And what's really cool is if you look upstream of that jam for about 100 feet, the river channel is completely filled in. So we have, in effect, reversed the channel evolution process with the simple, inexpensive act of cutting trees into the river and letting Mother Nature and natural processes take over to restore the ecosystem and the geomorphology and the functioning of that river. So river rewilded, maybe we could say. And I'll end it there. Thank you.